Hi, today I'd like to talk to you about the system administration section of your Songtracker system. My name is Richard, and I'll be going through this. This is for the owner of the software or your system administrator. This is not a section that network users, if you have multiple users, that they will go into. So this applies to you, the owner, or if you're a single user, you should know about this. You don't necessarily have to do much because we have it preset. But this tutorial kind of tells you and shows you where that section of the system is. So I'm in the home base file right now. I just opened the files and I came to this screen. I'm going to click on user prefs right here. I'm clicking that now. And you'll notice there's a security button here and one up here. They both do the same thing. If this gives you a couple of your preferences, but I'm going to click here and take you over to the security section. Now, you notice it says warning, keep out unless you're a system administrator. If you're the owner of the software, you're your own system administrator. So this is information that's helpful to know about. If you're not real deep into networking and stuff like that, you don't have to worry about this. But it's good to know if you have multiple users how this is set up. And if you're even a single user, it's good to know where you could change a couple of these things. I'll go over it right now and just give you a basic idea. The main fields are these yellow fields. This is your account name. It comes preset to admin, ADMIN. Don't change it. The first user is administrator, admin, and your password that comes out of the box is master. If you don't mess with that, you don't have to worry about anything. So if you want to change that, it gets into a lot more knowledge. So I would suggest you keep it set here. Okay, the 001, that is your user. That's the first user. That is your number as a system administrator. We have it set up for other users as well. 002, I'll get to that later. You don't need to use that if you're a single user, of course. These pop-up menus in here, some of them are for you and some are for network users. Like if you don't want another user to have access to Songtracker, you can actually click no in their record. If you have multiple users, let's say you have 3 users, then you would need at least 3 records in this database. There'd be 001 is you, and then 002 would be another user, 003 for example. You'd have a record for each person, and they may or may not have a separate password, depending how you want to set that up. If you get into that, it'll require some knowledge of FileMaker Pro and how to set up passwords and security. And that is done up in, well, I'll get to that later. Let me get to these first. So we did the first one. So if you don't want anybody to have access to this file is called password, you could click no, and they couldn't get here and look at this or mess it up. Just the system administrator, we want to be able to get in here. Allow outgoing email access. If they're not very knowledgeable yet and you don't want them sending emails out of the system, you could stop it for a while until you feel secure in that. The email application that they have, leave it at email client unless you want to set it at one of these others. Now the email show or hide dialog. Basically, that allows you to send emails over into your email application and leave them open so that you could send them throughout the day, and then you go over to your email app. When you check your email, you can actually send those documents out. It also gives you the opportunity to attach a document, and so that's how we have it set for now. So it shows those open emails in your email application. If you set it to hide, it's just going to send those emails directly out, and you're not going to see the dialog come up. You're not going to see the actual email. So I'd leave it at set at show until you decide you want something different. Now, a library prefix in our document library, in the library file, we have it so when you create, you have master documents in there. It's a document file. So you could have your master form letters in there, and say you send one to somebody, it could put a C:* space in front of every subject. Therefore, if you send an email, it'll say C:* subject, how are you today? You know, it'll be the subject. you could set it to that. We don't have it preset. We have it set to no, so it doesn't put that prefix in. What that does is allow you to know that that was a copy sent to someone from a master document. You may or may not want to use that, so leave these set the way they are. We preset these the way we think you'll want to use them. Allow for access to the web is the next one. Yes or no? If you don't want another user to be able to get to the website inside a Songtracker, there's some screens where you have a web viewer. If you don't want them using that, you can keep them out. Show the help training. I would totally recommend you leave this on in the early days, especially so when you're dragging a mouse over a field, it'll pull a pop-up like this and give you an explanation of the field that you're on. That's very helpful. Custom file access. We give you a file called custom that we just set up some basic fields. So if you have something else that you need to do with Songtracker and you'd like to have a separate file to represent that, say you had photographs and you wanted to be able to keep a log of all your photos or something, it's possible to set that up. It requires a little FileMaker knowledge. We put some basic fields and scripts, navigation scripts in the file. But if you become better at FileMaker, then you could develop that. The next one is setup file access. The setup file is where you keep your company information about your publishing company or companies, and it also keeps track of your equipment inventory. But if you don't want other users in there, then check no for their record. Otherwise, just leave it set at yes for your record. Calendar view, you have a large or small view you can choose. We have the preset at 150 for the window size. Zoom level, we recommend you keep them at this, or if you want to go smaller, you can change this. You can also change these two. Upon opening every day, it'll stop and pause for 30 seconds on an opening screen and give you a chance to set these preferences. These are all preferences that you have in Songtracker. Now your toolbar area is this area here. In most screens, we don't want it to show. We recommend you don't. So we have it set to hide. If you decided, no, we're using the status bar, okay, you could set that preference to open up, so that when scripts go through, a lot of them would see that preference. In this area here, this little field here, you can change that. It won't hurt anything in the system. You just to name each person that's using the system. You could put your name here if you want. It really doesn't matter. It's to identify the name of the employee using it. Allow royalty file access. If you don't want other users, of course, you want access to that, but other users, you may not want to see the financials. You may not want certain people in that. You could choose no for that. Allow high-level royalty. There's two different levels of royalty access, so you want them to be able to create statements, but you don't want them into higher levels to do advances and stuff like that. Allow contract file. So if you want people to be able to get into the contract file, yes or no, you can choose. All these you're going to want access, of course. Allow contract royalty access. Some of the screens have to do with royalty and advance information. If you want access to that, yes or no. Allow licensing file access. That deals with financial as well. You may or may not want your users in that. If you click no on their user record, it will keep them out. When they click a button to the license file, it'll say you don't have access to this file. Allow collections. This is in the licensing file also. Collections and paid out access. You may not want them to have access to that. Allow payments and deposit access. This is all self-explanatory. Allow royalty or report access. This is just royalty reports, so printing out statements. You may want some people to be able to print out royalty statements, but you don't want them to be able to go in and actually do data entry in the files. Allow access to personnel. In the people file, there's a section for employees, a personnel screen where you could keep personal information about your own employees. So you may not want any other employees in that, so you could keep them out by clicking no. Allow access to live show. That's also in the people file. That file has dollar amounts in it too for your artist. If you're managing artists or writers that are making concert money and you don't want your other employees knowing what those fees are, you can choose to keep certain people out of that. And the project file is where you keep track of artist royalties and management and producer royalties, anything with a point system royalty. You can keep people in and out of that file with yes or no. Over here, these are special FileMaker preferences. We want to have the highest level for you, but some of your other users, you may not want to have the highest level of access. The maintenance access on each, there's a little hammer icon like this here, up in here, that appears in the status bar area or our button palette. And if you don't want people to be able to get in there to do imports or exports, you can keep them out of that. When they click that button, it'll say they don't have access. Development limit, line item access, we have that set at no. This is if you're a developer and you probably don't want access to that. It's just too much information. Allow managed scripts access, that gets you into FileMaker, into this sections of FileMaker here, manage database, etc. You may or may not want access to that. Excuse me. To get into field definitions and things like that. Allow web access. We have web screens. You may or may not want access for that. You have a choice when you open the files if you want it to go to the people file or to the home base file. We have it preset to go to the home base file because it's a little simpler navigation, but it takes a couple extra steps. And there's big buttons in home base, so it's hard to not find them. In the people file, I personally like to go right to the people file, but I know the system, and it opens right up to people. That's usually where I want to access information, a phone number, etc. So once you get better with the files, you can come back to security here and change this option. And then when the file's open, it'll just go right to the people file. External file navigation button, preference. This is when you're clicking on the photo buttons, these bigger buttons here, that instead of going over to home base, it would go right to that file. So you have that option too. We set it to file now. You can change that if you want it to go through home base first. Allow dialing privileges. If you're on Windows and you have a dialer set up, you can allow that. This is to allow your users to delete records in the system. If there's a certain user and they don't know it enough and you don't want them deleting records inadvertently, you could keep them out of that by just clicking no. When dialing from a local area, no area code needed. That's a preference for if you're using a dialer. The speech integration I'd leave on. It's very helpful unless you decide, hey, I don't want to use that. You could turn it off here. But the speech integration allows, like in your document center, it'll allow to talk to you. It'll actually use a computer voice and read your letters. It's very helpful in the help file so that when you click on speech, it'll read the help file portion to you. It's up to you. Show welcome screens on launch, so that when the files are opening, you see all the screens come up. And you can say yes or no and have it go right to the people file and just open there. But we have it set to yes for now. So that takes care of that screen. There are a couple other screens. Keep in mind, each of these screens would be applicable 1 record per user in this file. So go to button prefs. We'll get to this more in the layouts, in the administration for the layouts file, which is a different file. But this is a place where you can access different screens and see what buttons are hooked up. This lists all the buttons for each layout in the system. It's all customizable. Shouldn't probably customize from here, but you can access it and read it once you've set them up. I'll get into that on layout. And then there's also a file preferences. Now, this is preset with the files that ship to you in the system. These other ones that are unchecked are not in your system, so you don't want to check them. But say you had a user that you did not want to be able to get into the royalty file. You could uncheck the royalty and roy items files, and they wouldn't be able to get into the line items or the royalties, for example. But on the master admin record, this record, you should leave all these checked off. So that's about it. I'll show you back to Songtracker Prefs. We went over that. Again, one record per each user. We've put up to 100 records in this file so that you could set it up. If you have a second user, use 002. Put their name in here. They may or may not have a separate password. If they do, you're going to have knowledge of how to set that up in FileMaker. The third user would be 003, etc. And you can change those preferences for each user. But if you only have one user, just concern yourself with number 001, which we have preset. When you're done with this screen, just click the hide button, and this will go away, and you'll be back to the home base button. I hope that's helpful. Thanks.